I would like when our next game ships for customers to look at it and say, this is the biggest leap I've seen within this generation. Starting with Gears 1 and going through everything we shipped so far. I expect our next round of games will be the biggest leap in this generation, with significant improvements in lighting due to the investments we've made in the new real-time shadowing technology, light mass, real-time ambient occlusion technology. I expect the visual quality improvements will be really significant, and also just the infrastructure improvements. The online features supported by the very scalable back-end server support we've built. And also I expect something less obvious to consumers to result, which is the huge improvements we've made into the Unreal Engine 3 tools, which are only visible to our artists, I think have a tangible effect on the overall quality of the game. They can make cooler stuff more quickly, so you see artists doing a lot more exploratory work to see what's possible. So I think that will show through in the end result of our next games as just an overall higher level of visual fidelity, cohesiveness, and creative decision-making in the games. Epic has never had big expansion plans. We did our deals with People Can Fly and Share Entertainment because of the opportunity that arose. We had this awesome developer who really needed our help at that point. We thought we could add a whole lot to their business. Help them make their processes better, help them attract world-class talent better than they could previously. So we did those acquisitions because we could, and we're very happy with the results. But we don't have a plan to go off and acquire a bunch more companies. Those sorts of things could happen, but it's not a great strategy to go off and say, we need to expand and do X when you don't know what X is or the magical ingredients required to make it work. Well, the Unreal Engine is eminently suitable for games that adopt more and more persistent online features. Already Gears of War has some of that. We're seeing more and more evolve over time. And we've been investing a lot in that area with the Unreal Master Control program, this back-end server framework for statistics tracking and persistent player data and features like that. With that system, it enables licensees out of the box to scale and build these more interesting back-ends required for the online components of a game. Without having to build all that infrastructure from scratch. It's a multi-man-year investment in those sorts of things. And we'd really like to get away from the model where only the absolute top gigantic developers, like Epic and Infinity Ward, are able to build significant, or Bungie are able to build really significant online features and open it up to everybody through our licensing program. Well, Unreal Tournament is certainly a major long-term priority, but we're planning not to release a new major retail game in that series for several years. So we have that effort somewhat on hold while we work on a few other initiatives. Definitely, the Unreal Tournament community has been the center of all of our modding efforts for Epic's entire history. We released the first moddable Epic game in 1998, and there's been a gigantic community around it ever since. So we plan to maintain the game to carry that community forward. And we actually have a number of initiatives coming up that will really expand our community efforts, open up the engine to more people to use freely and build cool stuff. Currently, things that you do with Unreal Tournament we'll try to open up to a larger audience. The really interesting thing about Unreal Tournament is that once we've defined the game in this generation, the community takes it and runs with it. So you've seen the community create a massive set of maps and mods that go far beyond anything we could ever do. So we almost solved the Unreal Tournament 4 and 5 problem ourselves by just making this tool set available, because the community is doing more than we could have ever hoped to do internally. So one of the major factors behind that is the Make Something Unreal contest, which has been running for more than a year and a half now. It's a contest open to all mod developers. We give prizes in all sorts of different categories, and more importantly, the ability for mod authors to gain a lot of exposure for their work. So you have all these teams and individuals competing to build the best maps, the best gameplay modifications, and the best entirely new game experiences from the ground up, and making them available to the community, and then going through the contest to potentially get some significant prizes. That's always been a major area of investment for us, and it's just astonishing to see what the community does there. Well, Microsoft's Project Natal is really interesting because they haven't only solved the problem of taking video input in real life and turning it into game mechanics, but they've they've solved the really challenging problems there of deducing from the video stream, where people are standing and what their poses are and exactly how they're moving their limbs, which is the gigantic, billion-dollar research problem. It's very interesting that Microsoft did that because that's a technology I know Microsoft Research has been working on for more than a decade. And to see that finally make its way into mainstream really helps show off what Microsoft is really capable of when it's firing on all cylinders. They have this long-term research initiative that's finally pouring into a great consumer product that's going to really change the gaming experience for a large part of the market. I expect Project Natal will have a really dramatic impact on the Xbox 360's long-term picture. And this is the first time that a hardware company has done something really major within a console generation. To upgrade to Xbox 360 with Project Natal, you usually only see that class of innovation within a hardware transition, going to the whole next generation. But I gather from that we're going to see this generation last even longer than you might have expected when it started. We're seeing in the industry what we typically see, several years into a console generation, which is a whole lot of incremental improvement as people build better and better games and systems on top of the hardware that's already there, as opposed to breakthrough levels of innovation in hardware. I think we have many more years of life left in the current generation of consoles, Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. We're really only starting to scratch the surface of what's possible there. In the first year of titles, we shipped Gears of War 1, which was a really impressive game visually, but I think we can get a factor of 2 or 3 more visual quality out of the system than we shipped in the very first iteration. And you saw some of that improvement with Gears of War 2, but in the next round of titles we'll be shipping in the future on this generation of platforms, you'll see a more significant set of improvements than we've ever had within a generation. What drives the need for new hardware is diminishing returns on current hardware. Once you see that year after year the games aren't becoming significantly better and developers have really built full game experiences that max out the hardware's capability, not only maxing out the technical capabilities of rendering pixels, but also maxing out the capabilities of what sort of gameplay experience can you build within this platform. Once we get to that point, then a hardware transition is inevitable because that's needed for industry growth. At some point you just have to burn it all down and start over from scratch to build something dramatically better. But we're certainly years from that point right now. The major challenge in streaming games is, does Microsoft and Sony have the wherewithal to push retailers out of the picture in that regard? Because they're still highly reliant on retailers to sell the hardware. So if you start selling all the software online, are they still on board for that? Certainly developers like Epic Games are ready to make that work and willing to make that work if the major players are willing to go that direction. It's very hard to predict changes in the industry's business model because the fact that almost all games are sold in retail outlets nowadays rather than online doesn't have any technical basis, right? It's all a matter of the long-term history of the industry. I could see as soon as one major publisher or platform provider starts a major initiative to sell games online, I could see the whole retail channel collapsing in terms of game sales over time. It's certainly so much less convenient a way to play games that it's hard to see that lasting forever once people have started moving. Because these especially high-end console buyers, if you have an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 3, you're a leading-edge consumer. You have a broadband connection. You're the kind of person who would buy one of these streaming games, whereas somebody who still has a PlayStation 2 or a Nintendo Wii isn't necessarily a kind of customer. Well, online technology is really interesting. They stream. You can play games through the internet by sending your inputs across the net to their servers, and they stream video back showing the game. So it completely decouples the client from all of the computing resources required for a game. So theoretically, you could have very powerful computers on one end. I think that technology has a lot of potential. The internet's latency is now good enough with broadband connections that you can actually have a good game experience that way. And the only barriers to that are just market issues. What kind of input hardware can you guarantee every player has? Well, you can only guarantee they have a keyboard and a mouse. You're not going to have a cool controller or a joystick or anything like that. So I see a bunch of non-technical barriers, but certainly the technology problems there are solved. With OnLive, I certainly don't see that technology becoming the dominant way to play games within the next 10 to 15 years. The limitation there is our bandwidth still falls far short of what's needed to stream the quality of video that you can have on a local machine. Currently we're at 1080p resolutions at the very high end, and you're an order of magnitude short on consumer bandwidth to be able to support that. And at the same time, bandwidth is going up at a slower curve than hardware performance. So what you see is every year we're able to deliver twice as many teraflops to users through PCs. And in consoles, this shows up as every 8 years or so, there's a gigantic leap. But bandwidth goes on a slower curve that's limited by basically laying fiber optic cables across the country. So it's not clear that that technology will ever catch up and completely supplant high-end platforms, but it does provide a way for users to play a game on any piece of hardware, any PC, no matter how crappy, will be able to play a game with a good experience through OnLive.